When you went to the doctor and said, I'm suffering all these terrible things, did they mention endo at that point?
No, they said, this is normal.
Oh!
They said, oh yeah, this is normal for a girl. Like, it means you're ovulating and you're having a very normal period.
You know, as women, we put our needs at the bottom of the pack and people pleasing, and we sort of don't want to make a big fuss and blah, blah, blah. And
that bloody estrogen.
Exactly.
It's good for some things.
It's really good, but also causes problems. Estrogen is a driver of inflammation, and inflammation underpins endometriosis.
No mai, haere mai, to grey areas with me, Petra Bagust. Today we're talking endometriosis, which affects 1 in 10 women in Aotearoa New Zealand. That's massive. I interview gynaecologist Dr. Amelia Ryan, but first I sit down with Fatima Savea, who lived with endo for years before being diagnosed. She was born in Iraq and moved here as an 8-year-old with her family. She's married to former All Black and Moana Pacifica player Julian Savea. Her journey to health and motherhood has been complicated. Here's Fatima. Kia ora, Fatima. It's so great to be able to sit down and chat.
Kia ora, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We're talking about something that's kind of unseen and a little bit hidden and a little bit of a grey area, but it is getting more attention now.
Definitely, especially on social media. A lot of women are finally talking up about it and speaking out. So it is, it's great that we can sit here and discuss it as well.
Absolutely. Now, can you give me, for people who don't know, you're originally from Iraq?
I am, yes. I moved to New Zealand when I was 8 years old with my family. So New Zealand is home now to me and my children and my parents. And I am 31 years old. I am an accounts manager. I work for my family's business. And I am also a part-time social media influencer. I hate that word, the influencer word.
Is there anything part-time about social media?
Yeah.
Wow, she's relentless.
Yeah, so I do social media on the side as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, you knew when you were growing up what you wanted to be.
Yeah, a wife, a mum. I knew I wanted to get married young. I knew I wanted to have children young and follow my parents' footsteps because my parents are my best friends now. Mm-hmm. They had me when they were 23 and 24, and I had my daughter when I was 23. So I kind of followed in their footsteps. And So knowing that you wanted to be a wife and mum, I'm guessing meant that you were trying to have children early. But can we roll it back even a little further? As a young woman growing up, like we're talking about endometriosis, so cat out of the bag. Yes.
You're going to turn out to have endometriosis.
Which I didn't know until after my first pregnancy.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Can we wind the clock back and look at your first period and how things went?
Yeah. So I got my period, I was 11 years old when I first got my period. So I was very young. Like imagining if my daughter got her period at 11, I'm like, that is crazy. I got it at 11. It wasn't really talked about in my household. It was just, you know, yep, you get your period. You don't tell your dad about it. You don't speak about it. And I remember I got it at school. I was at school, year 7, and I freaked out because I wasn't prepared. I didn't know what to do. So I just started crying. And
that makes sense, right? You're bleeding.
You're
and
bleeding.
You don't know why.
Yeah, you don't know what's happening. And I think it was fine in the beginning. My periods were fine. It wasn't until I got into high school I started getting the severe pain, the clots, like size of golf balls. Like it was really scary. And having to double line my pads because I would leak through at school, and it was so embarrassing having to wear 2 pairs of underwear just so that it holds everything together.
Such a good idea. Where did you come up with that from?
Like a normal pair and then like boxer pairs, you know, the tight ones.
Yes.
So I had to do a lot of things. Like at nighttime I'd have to put like a towel under my bed. Like looking back, it's crazy that we just thought it was normal.
Did your mum know that you were doing all this extra stuff just to contain the blood?
Yeah, she knew. She just thought that was normal because she had heavy periods also.
Do you have sisters?
I don't have
Okay.
sisters. So it was just me.
So your mum's like, this happened to me, this is happening to Tima, this makes sense.
Yeah. And I put up with that up until I reached university. Heavy periods. I would sometimes not even be able to go to school if it was like the first day of my period, from how painful it was, like hunched over and so much pain from the cramping.
So describe that to me. You're like, I can't get out of bed and move and function today. Are you taking pain relief? What's happening?
So pain relief, it's the pain, I can't even explain it. It's like something's inside you cutting you with like a knife. It's horrendous. And all I could take was Panadol. That was all was given to me. So wasn't very helpful. So it caused nausea as well. So I was nauseous a lot. Headaches were really bad. And then I would get brain fog at school. And I had no idea what all this was. I just thought it was normal period because that's what I was told.
Okay. So you've got clots, you're doubled up in pain, brain fog, headaches, and nausea are your current suite of period pain symptoms.
Yeah, in high school.
So what happened next?
So it got to the point where I just felt like I couldn't speak about it with my parents. And I found out from some friends that they were on a contraceptive pill for their periods. And I knew if I brought that up to my parents, they would kill me because contraception in their head is, oh, our daughter's going to start having sex, which wasn't the case for me. I just needed something to control the pain in the periods.
I understand that though there are certain cultural and religious context where contraception equals opportunity for promiscuity or to behave in a way that is counter to the family's values. So it is hard to separate those two.
Yeah.
Where the pill in that situation is a therapy rather than an excuse to have sex.
Exactly. And that wasn't the goal for me. It was mainly maintaining the pain and, just having a better quality of life. So got to university, I ended up taking myself to the doctor and putting myself on the pill. And at that point, I was like, wow, my life is so different now. And it just changed everything because I was able to skip a period if I wanted to. I had lighter periods and it just changed everything.
Pain-wise, nausea, hot headaches?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It just all went away and I was like, oh, why didn't I do this sooner? But again, now that I know, I wouldn't do that again because that was just masking what was going on inside. It wasn't a solution to what was happening inside my body.
This is a common thing with life. We are so often just seeking a solution to a problem, right?
Yeah, a quick fix.
And the removal of pain can be seen as the solution.
Yes.
When it's taking the symptom away, but it's not digging into the underlying issue.
So from the age of 18 to the age of 27, I had endometriosis and I had no idea. So from the age of 18, when I put myself on the pill.
Well, probably earlier than 18 you had endo, right?
Yeah, so probably
probably
way
experiencing
earlier,
endo.
like 14, I think I had it. So from that age to the age of 28, when I finally got diagnosed, I was living with it, not knowing.
And it's potentially doing damage inside your body. Okay, so what were your other symptoms?
So yeah, the back pain, really bad back pain.
How did that present?
Aching, yes, like shooting pain down the leg as well.
Okay.
And when I get my periods, the bowel movement was just messed up all the time.
And were you putting this all together? Was this all?
I had no idea.
So you thought, oh, sometimes I'm having constipation issues and sometimes I'm having back pain issues and sometimes I'm having period pain issues, and what is wrong with my body?
Yeah, because I wouldn't have thought that they were linked together. Like my back pain was because of my periods or the bowel movement was because of my periods. I just wouldn't have put that link together.
And you mentioned brain fog as well.
Brain fog. It is insane. I just forget everything. I'll talk to my husband about something and then a few days later he'll mention it again. I said, oh, did we talk about that? Or do you remember the movie that we watched? What happened in it? No idea. It's like sometimes I'll have conversations with people and absolutely forget I've had those conversations. And I've sat at dinner before with close friends and they're like, yeah, we had this conversation with you. And I just can't remember.
So how did that make you feel?
Stupid. I'm like, am I losing my mind? What is going on? Like, surely I'm not getting like, I don't know.
Dementia.
Yeah. Early onset dementia. Like I thought I was, seriously, I thought I had a problem. And I was telling my mum, I was like, Mum, I think there's something wrong with my brain. And she was like, what's going on? I said, I just forget everything. And she said, oh, you've just got a lot on your mind. You was just stressed and, but.
Whereas now when I think about what we know about the perimenopausal menopause transition, that brain fog is a hormonal impact on the brain, right? Yeah. It's a symptom of, or it's a sign of hormonal flux.
Absolutely.
Which of course, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So as a young woman who is having these tremendously heavy periods and then having other physical impacts from the endo, when you went to the doctor and said, I'm suffering all these terrible things, did they mention endo at that point?
No, they said, this is normal.
Oh.
They said, oh, yeah, this is normal for a girl. Like, it means you're ovulating and you're having a very normal period. That's what the doctor said to me, and I remember it so vividly. I was like, surely this is not normal to be in so much pain and have all these symptoms, but I just trusted what the doctor said. And
so you get to managing these symptoms and it's like magic. The pill has solved something for you. You're able to carry on with your life and you're like, why didn't I do this years sooner? But I guess your desire to get married young and have children, that dream came true.
Yeah, it did. So I got married quite young. I was 19 when I got engaged and then just turned 21 when I got married.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So we are celebrating 10 years of marriage in December. We survived. And I got off the pill before the wedding just to kind of cleanse my body. I said, oh, maybe it'll take some time for me to get pregnant, so I better get off the pill and just regulate my periods again and make sure everything's right. And we tried. Every month. Did not work. Well, I wasn't falling pregnant. It got to a year and I was thinking, okay, this is a bit weird. Why am I not getting pregnant? I'm healthy, I'm young, I'm fit. And I remember in March of 2017, me and my husband Julian sat down and we said, oh, we should probably book in to go see a specialist. And we had booked an appointment at the Fertility Associates. It got to a week before the appointment and I didn't get my period. So I went and took a pregnancy test. At this point, I'd done hundreds of pregnancy tests because we were trying like every month.
You were keen to get pregnant.
I was so keen. And so I took a pregnancy test and there was like a faint line. And I remember doing another one, a digital one, and it came out as pregnant. And I ran to the lounge screaming. I said, Julian, I'm pregnant. He was like, no, you're not. Don't lie. You're not pregnant. Because we've had so many disappointments. I said, no, I promise, look. And we just sat there looking at it in disbelief. And we kind of thought, oh, maybe it's like a false positive. Mm-hmm. So we went to the doctor and I had a blood test and yeah, I was pregnant. So we didn't end up going to the fertility specialist and had our daughter. And
congratulations.
Thank you.
So brilliant. In the year of trying, did your period pain come back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were like, ugh.
Yeah. Every month it was like, oh, here we go again.
Mm-hmm. So you're still not diagnosed at this stage.
No.
But you decided to have a second child?
Yes.
I'm guessing.
Yeah. So when my daughter was born, I was like, put me on the pill. I don't want to get pregnant straight away. Little did I know I couldn't get pregnant. So I went on the pill and then got off it as soon as she turned 1. Mm-hmm. And we said, okay, we're going to start trying now. You know, we wanted that 2-year age gap between the two.
So you're thinking it's going to take us a year? Or are you thinking,
a couple of months?
Okay, so you're thinking I've cracked it now.
I've cracked it. I've had a pregnancy. Everything went well.
My body knows what to do.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, let's do it. And from the point of when we started trying to being diagnosed with endometriosis was 3.5 years. So I didn't get pregnant for 3.5 years. And it was just every month was disappointment after disappointment. And I just would think, what was wrong with me? Like, what's going on? We were living in France at the time when we were trying for our second. And after the 1.5 year mark, I would say, I said, okay, it's time to go start IVF, because I don't know what else we can do. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to sit here and be disappointed every month. Let's just go and do IVF. So we started the process. We got all the testing done. My husband did the testing. I did the testing. And then COVID hit and everything got put on hold. We weren't allowed to do IVF. So we ended up moving back to New Zealand and got the ball rolling again in New Zealand. And I went to a fertility specialist in Auckland. Again, endometriosis wasn't touched on at all, even after telling them about all my symptoms. And
surprising, isn't it?
So surprising.
Yeah.
And then it was just by chance that my husband ended up getting a contract down in Wellington to play rugby. So we ended up moving to Wellington. And I said, oh, well, I can't keep seeing this specialist for all this stuff. Let's move to a specialist in Wellington. And we went and saw the Fertility Associates in Wellington. And I saw Dr. Simon McDowell, who is an endometriosis specialist. Okay. And I didn't know. Okay. And I told him all of the symptoms and what we were going through. We were going in there to begin our journey of IVF. And he sat down and he said, oh, before we start IVF, I think you've got something called endometriosis, and I really want to diagnose that first. So he explained to me what endometriosis was and how it affects fertility and affects women. And he was telling me about all these stories of how women go misdiagnosed or undiagnosed for many years. Anyway, so from the day that I met him to the surgery was 7 days. Wow. So he booked me in straight away for the surgery, and it turned out that I had moderate endometriosis. So I think there's levels of endo, and I was in the middle. And he managed to laser cut out whatever he could. And he said to me, we went for a follow-up, he said, you've got between a 10 and 12% chance to fall pregnant naturally now with the way that your fallopian tubes are blocked up. We can either do another surgery or we can start IVF. And I said, let's just start IVF, because I'm sick of waiting and my body's been through a lot already. But at least I knew what I had going on in my body. I knew what I could put my finger to, and not sit there and blame myself that something's wrong with me or something's wrong with my husband. I finally knew what the answer was, and that's I was living with a disease. So I'm very grateful to him, and we did IVF and I fell pregnant in the first round, which I'm really grateful for as well. Yeah, so after I had my son, I gained so much weight. My hormones were back raging at me in full force. I started having my endo pains again. But I had the Mirena put in when I had my son, 3 months after having him, but I was still getting the pelvic pain. And apparently the Mirena is supposed to get rid of all symptoms, right? And I thought, the first year I had the Mirena, I said to myself, oh, why did I do this to myself? Because I'm still feeling the pain, even though I'm getting lighter periods, but it's something still going on in my pelvis. But it subsided, and it's been 2.5 years I've had the Mirena in, and I've lived a much more comfortable life than when I did not have it. So that's helped a lot, the Mirena. And that was recommended to me by my gynaecologist, my obstetrician, who herself got diagnosed with endometriosis at the age of 45. Yeah. Wow. And she said that she had to have a hysterectomy just to help with the endometriosis pain. So if an obstetrician, it's wild to me. It's wild. Someone in that field. Yeah. 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 The mystery of the female body and probably the significant lack of research. It makes you think, if someone like that goes undiagnosed for that many years, imagine what young girls are going through. Yeah. So can we talk about, I guess, the extended impact of endometriosis? Yeah. Because there's
There's the physical reality of pain and nausea and headaches and clots.
Yeah. There's also the mental side.
So how is it impacting your life?
Tremendously, if I'm being honest. I had depression. I was tired all the time and didn't want to do anything, didn't want to get out of bed. And I felt like it was affecting me being a good mother to my daughter at the time, and a wife and a friend. And it was just, it took over my life really. And then also not falling pregnant every month, having that disappointment also, I just spiraled really.
And it's almost like failure, right? If this is the hope and the goal of your life is to be a mum and to have children, and then you're failing at that, it's robbing you of what you already have, which is the marriage and a child.
Exactly.
In terms of that, I guess, the mental health impact, right?
And now looking back at it, I think to myself, like, you had a beautiful miracle child, your daughter, an incredible husband, and a beautiful life. Like, I look back now and I wish I had just reminded myself of that. But in the moment, it's more of like looking into the future and wanting another child, wanting a sibling for my daughter, and failing at that. So I think that's what really affected me.
What did you get to first, the endodiagnosis or looking after and managing your mental health?
Endodiagnosis first. Okay. And then once I knew what I had, then it was about managing everything else. And it wasn't until last year I said, okay, this is enough, like what's going on with me? And then, I got diagnosed with anxiety and depression.
And so what's worked and helped in supporting you in your journey with anxiety and depression?
Medication. I hate to admit it, but it's changed my life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the better.
Hey, look, I really appreciate you sharing your story. 2 last questions. Mm-hmm. One is, are you finished your family, or do you want to have more children?
After everything.
Not that it's any of my business.
No, it's absolutely fine. I get that question asked a lot. After everything that I've been through with my body, and now finally starting to feel like myself and feeling comfortable in my body, being happy with myself and my body, I think that we are done. But never say never. If it happened naturally by miracle, then of course, but we won't go down the path of having a embryo placed or anything like that. I think we're very content with what we have, and I'm just happy to have my old self back now.
And what would your 80-year-old self,
80?
Yeah, when you're 80, so you think 50 years' time.
Oh, wow.
What would 80-year-old Tima say to you today?
Oh, wow.
You can take a minute. You can imagine yourself as 80.
I'm imagining like my children and their children and their children surrounding me, all my great-grandkids and my grandchildren. And she would probably say that she's proud of me and proud of the mother that I am, and the wife that I am, the daughter that I am. I think family is like very important to me, so I think she'd be proud of that.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Yay. I think she would say that to you.
Yeah.
Family's
so
obviously
too.
just, first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something that strikes me is the far-reaching impact of undiagnosed endometriosis. It's so huge on physical, mental and emotional health, as well as family life and beyond. Coming up, I sit down with Dr. Amelia Ryan, a gynaecologist at Advanced Gynaecology Auckland and in the endometriosis unit at Te Whatuora in Waitemata. We discuss what's going on inside the female body and how to get diagnosed. Dr. Ryan's next. Share this episode with your friends or strangers and subscribe on your favourite platform to get notified of all future episodes. Dr. Amelia Ryan. Ooh, this is so fun. I love talking to people who know things, who have spent time and energy delving deeply. Mm-hmm. So do you get called an obgyn or an, what do you get called?
Yes.
What's your official title?
Obstetrician and gynaecologist.
I like it.
Dual trained, but I no longer work in the obstetric field, so just a gynaecologist these days.
Nice. Can you define for me what is endometriosis?
Absolutely. So in its most basic terms, endometriosis is the presence of the cells that normally line the inner aspect of the uterus. Those cells come out at the time of your period. Cells very much like those cells being found in other places in the body where they shouldn't normally be. So most of the time that's within the pelvis itself, but they can rarely be in other weird places like the diaphragm or even the chest cavity.
Really? Can I ask how those cells that are supposed to be inside the uterus end up in other places?
Absolutely. So we don't really know. Okay. But there are a number of different ideas that fit to some degree with the different types of disease that we see. The leading idea is the idea that when the uterus contracts to squeeze the blood out through the cervix at the time of the period, that is in essence a mini labour. It's kind of like being in labour and giving birth, but to a smaller degree. And a little bit of blood will actually be squeezed out through the fallopian tube onto the inside of the belly. That process itself is normal and happens in everyone who gets their period. But those cells just get reabsorbed over the course of your period and go away. But in a small group of people, the sort of 1 in 10, 1 in 7 people who have endometriosis, those cells don't get reabsorbed properly and then slosh around inside the belly and come in contact with other structures and then stick to them. And that accounts for pelvic disease to some degree, but it doesn't really explain chest disease or even nose endometriosis that is incredibly rare, but sometimes is found.
So these cells that escape somehow, well, there's a few things there. Is like, is it incredible that we don't yet know, like how much attention has been paid to this disease that we don't yet know how it occurs? I
think so, but I also think it's an incredibly complex condition. So there has been an enormous amount of work looking into this, and some of that research focuses on trying to grow endometriosis in animal models to see if they can create this disease environment that endo will be the result. And other things are looking at the different types of disease that exist and trying to work their way back to explain that. So some endometriosis probably occurs at the level of embryological development. So way back when we are just a few cells forming into a very, very formative human being. And some of the cells,
you can use your hands.
Just great to move them above. Yeah, I'm doing it down here. So when the sort of body is organising into a fetus, we start in 3 layers of cells that are different, and then those 3 layers of cells will form into different parts of the body, and that's very well established. And we think that maybe if some of those cells just creep over into the wrong layer, and then they will be there forever from that fetal development. So that is an entirely different set of circumstances to somebody who develops endometriosis because of the leaking of the cells back into the pelvis.
Okay, so there's not a one reason, one solution.
That would be lovely, but unfortunately not, and probably a lot of overlap between them as well.
No, that makes sense. When you said a small group, 1 in 10 to 1 in 7.
Not that small
Not
group.
that small.
No. Yes, 1 in 7 women of reproductive age in Australia.
Yes.
So we extrapolate that as local data to New Zealand, but we don't have a local figure.
Okay, so endometriosis, as I'm understanding it, is where cells are in the wrong type of cells in the wrong place, potentially attaching to other structures, maybe bones or organs. And then what do? Do they just benignly sit there or no?
No, they can benignly sit there, but often they will create a reaction. Basically, the body reacts against them, and I describe that a little bit like having a splinter in your finger. So you get that red, hot, angry area around a splinter. Your body's trying to flick that off, and that reaction is called inflammation. Inflammation is the issue with endometriosis that leads to all of the problems. So that reaction itself is actually a correct reaction in that the cells are in the wrong place, the body is reacting appropriately, and we really feel probably that it is an immune system issue where the immune system is not recognizing that those cells need to be mopped up and gotten rid of, rather than the reaction against them being abnormal.
So you're saying that potentially these cells are escaping in all sorts of women, And for some women, their bodies will mop the cells up and it's fine. They have the inflammation or...
Well, they will never develop the inflammation
Okay.
because those cells will be eliminated. But in this group of people, they're not. And that's why we see associations with other immune system conditions like inflammatory bowel disease, which is an entirely different set of circumstances, but also underpinned by the immune system. And there is a strong genetic link. It's not completely inheritable. There's no gene that we can test for at this stage, but we do tend to see things run in families. And why there's also an association between other kind of immune modifying situations like childhood trauma, poor mental health, those sorts of things that can impact on the immune system in the long term that can also be associated with the development of endometriosis.
Okay. That's tough, isn't it? Okay, so when you say poor mental health, what's that?
I think it would be the state of kind of trauma and high levels of vigilance where you've got cortisol pumping through your body for a long period of time that can impact, because cortisol has a strong immune function, impact on your immune system. So that could be high levels of anxiety, PTSD, even things like poor sleep, living in a state of kind of inflammation from sedentary lifestyle, an inflammatory diet, those sorts of things.
So multifaceted.
Absolutely. And it's not that one of those things, it's not if you've got a background of childhood trauma, that's why this happened. But we need to look at a person holistically and from lots of different angles to understand their position.
Yeah, and understand kind of the whole state of the body, right?
Yes.
It is, we are intrinsically, we cannot separate our mind from our body,
Absolutely
our heart
not.
from our mind. They're working in unison all the time. And I guess there are things that do impact negatively, physically and or emotionally and or mentally or spiritually. So it's, is this new to really look at the whole person and their background?
Well, I think endometriosis started to increase in awareness, both from a community perspective, but also within the medical industry a long time ago, maybe 30 years ago. And that has really picked up pace. And there's been a lot of interest and research and funding, which is fantastic. And probably the current modern management of endometriosis has been honed over the last 5 to 10 years, but it's still developing. It's still
in progress.
It's absolutely. And will probably continue to be.
I'd say that about most of life and
Exactly.
medicine and politics and science. And
I mean, originally people would have just been told that there was nothing wrong and that it was all in the head. And then there was a time where it was a very surgical approach. So it was all about having surgery. And now it's become a little bit more nuanced that yes, there's a role for surgery, but also we need to look at all of these other aspects of a person's life if we want to manage this well.
yeah. And in fact, it's almost like there are medical trends, right? You used to break your Achilles and somebody would cut you open and sew your Achilles up. Now they're like, okay, we're just going to put you in the boot for 6 weeks and your body's going to tether those little bits together.
Yeah.
I say that because my husband just broke his Achilles.
I see.
So can I ask about the symptoms of endo, or what is it that a woman looks for or experiences if she's got endometriosis?
Sure. So inflammation being the underpinning issue with endometriosis, generally speaking, causes pain. Just like if you've got a splinter in your finger, you're going to get sore. So pain in the pelvis is the kind of general symptom, and that manifests as period pain as the classic symptom. Mm-hmm. Pain with sex, typically deep pain with sex, pain with passing a bowel motion, pain with passing urine. So if you think about the the pelvis as being a very neighbourly dynamic space.
Yeah,
so
there's lots of things in there,
lots of
all
things,
next to each other.
and all undergoing function all the time. So they're not just sitting there quietly and benignly. Bladder filling and emptying, poo passing through the rectum, potentially having sex in the vagina, growing a baby in the uterus, menstruating, all of these, ovulating from the ovary, all sorts of things happening. And most of the time, in most people, those functions are happening without really a lot of awareness at all. Like, I couldn't tell you right now how full my bladder is. You only kind of know when it's getting close to being full or if it's not full. But once you develop inflammation in the pelvis, some of those natural functions can become painful. And the other thing that happens aside from inflammation is the development of adhesions. So that's scar tissue, kind of like cobwebs that start to connect those structures together. And those cobwebs can increase in strength and become almost like concrete over time. And just like concrete in the world, it shrinks. And so it pulls everything together and everything can get really stuck together in a very, very solid way.
From cobwebs to concrete, that was quite a quick transition. Cobwebs are super flexy and flimsy, and concrete's not so much.
Not so much. That doesn't happen overnight, over a very long time, probably years and years, maybe even decades for some people. But that's the journey.
A potential trajectory. So what does that, what sort of are women experiencing if those adhesions between those functioning, the bladder, the bowel, the ovaries, the uterus, what's it feel like if they become more like concrete?
Well, for some people, weirdly, nothing. And they are completely asymptomatic and live their life without any pain at all. And they might have a hysterectomy in the 80s because they developed cancer, and we find out that they had terrible, terrible endometriosis in their younger years and they had no awareness of that at all. So the disease severity doesn't necessarily correlate to the severity of pain.
Okay, which is good to know, right?
Absolutely.
Like it's not about you deserve, you've got the correct amount of pain even, or
absolutely, it doesn't invalidate your pain by having insignificant disease from a disease model perspective.
Yeah.
But it also, and the location of pain doesn't necessarily correlate necessarily to the location that people isolate their pain to be either. But typically, if you imagine that the bladder anatomy is impacted by adhesions, then as the bladder, in a normal function, the bladder fills and empties quite organically in this really coordinated way, that suddenly you've got the bladder on stretch and full, it's pulling against this wall because it's attached somewhere that it wouldn't normally be, then perhaps it might tell you that your bladder is full a bit earlier than it would have before. So people develop this sort of uncoordinated filling and emptying of their bladder over time. People talk about having a weak bladder. They might go to the movies with their friends and they can't go through the whole movie without getting up and going for a wee, or they go for a wee and it doesn't quite empty fully, and so then they get up and go back and start watching the movie again, and they have to leave straight afterwards to go and empty their bladder again. Equally, when the bladder's on stretch, often people find that quite painful because it's pulling against this adhesion, or things like that. It can be very nuanced.
Yeah. I've been noticing a lot more kōrero and talk around it. Should women have to experience period pain? Like, is period pain normal, natural, acceptable, or are we able to be period pain free? Because if we lived in a way where period pain wasn't normal, that would help show up the endo, right?
Yes. The problem is that pain can be normal, and so it exists on a spectrum, and how do you know if your pain moves into this abnormal space? And if you have endo, you may be asymptomatic, so it doesn't necessarily correlate directly with pain as well. That's why it's so complex. But I do feel very strongly that, particularly with rhetoric on Instagram and TikTok and that sort of thing, that there is this move towards over pathologizing the female experience of their bodies, and that not all pain is endo, and that having period pain is a normal part of menstruating. It's just, it shouldn't be XYZ.
Right. Because I'm thinking, I come at it from, if I'm going to go to the gym and exercise my muscles, there's going to be discomfort.
Absolutely.
If I'm going to run a marathon, I'm going to end up in pain, but I'm actually choosing an exertion and an activity that will put my body under some stress. So I guess there's cramping and period pain that is within a normal range. Many people don't know. When I talked to Miriam Makamo a couple of years ago for grey areas, she had no idea that her pain level was that much more significant to her sister until quite late in life. She talked to her sister and said, "Are you not crushed by this pain?" And her sister's like, "No." And that's
even between sisters, let alone, work colleagues, friends, absolutely. It's not historically been something that we talk about very often at all.
So where's the useful range of talking about it so that we're not pathologizing all pain and we're not also isolated in our pain and therefore don't have anybody to bounce off or to ask questions with or to investigate?
I think that education, particularly in the adolescent space, is really important. So, and that's where you inform and arm young women with an understanding of what is normal that hopefully anchors them in a place where as they move forward in their reproductive years that they'll have an understanding of that. I mean, 96% of people will experience some pain with their period. So it's very, very much a normal experience. If I equate getting your period to being in a mini labour, having a baby is painful. It definitely is normal. That muscle is going to become achy and fatigued, just like doing 100 press-ups. And as well as that, the hormones that are released that cause the onset of your period, which are called prostaglandins, are exactly the same hormones that are released in the early phases of labour. And they can also impact on your gut function, creating a little bit of, initially a bit of constipation, slowing down of poo through the rectum, and then an onset of diarrhea at the beginning of a period, which can also be part of the normal experience of getting a period. But then if that becomes more significant and profound, it starts to move into that abnormal area. So we used to say that basically if you couldn't go to work, that was a threshold of, well, your pain is too severe. And I guess that's true. But women's productivity doesn't need to be like the only thing that's important to us in terms of them living their lives. I would tend to say 2 days before your period, 2 days into your period, probably okay to have some discomfort. But if you're getting pain for a week before and the full week of your period, or it's lingering beyond that, that's starting to become abnormal. In terms of managing that pain, taking simple pain relief like paracetamol and ibuprofen tend to be enough to take the pain down to a level where you can live your life, or it goes away completely. And if it's still really significantly bothering you, still impacting on your ability to live your life, that's probably abnormal as well. And then, yes, if your pain is stopping you from going to work, stopping you playing sport, going out for dinner, going to school, hanging out with your friends,
exercising,
being like content in your life, that is full stop a problem that needs to be looked at, regardless of the number of days or, all of those sorts of things. We also would say pain that moves away from the simple kind of period cramp pain, where you're getting pain with your bowel motions, pain with your bladder, pain with sex. Those are also tend to be red flags that we like to look at too.
Well, it's nice to know. It's nice to know what to look out for, right? It's nice to have a guide to be like, this is not the general experience.
Exactly. And not all of those people will have endo, and there will be some people who don't experience that who will have endo, but I think it is helpful to have a framework.
I think so too. Can I ask what's some of the most surprising symptoms of endometriosis that you've come across, or unusual?
Well, if you had chest endometriosis, so within the thorax or the chest cavity, I have seen someone who developed a pneumothorax every month with their period, so their lung would collapse.
No, that's terrible.
Very significant and severe, and very unusual.
Okay, so we won't expect that in any way.
No, but that is just a little
that's just a
case study.
Wow.
I am blown away by the many different ways endometriosis can show up in the body, and I'm so grateful we're talking about it more. Coming up, we discuss delays in getting a diagnosis and if anything has changed. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at Petra Bagust. You can also watch our full videos on YouTube or Spotify.
Do you see a change in, like, that women basically used to experience terrible pain, debilitating pain, life-impacting pain, and wait before they went and saw somebody about it? Do you think in this sort of age of a bit more information floating around, women are seeking answers sooner or asking questions sooner?
Yes, definitely. There's a huge amount of community awareness now, which is fantastic, particularly with younger people, probably because of social media, amongst other things. But I do still see people, particularly in the later years, in their 40s, who have just sat on it for their whole lives and crop up kind of towards the end of all of this when they're sort of coming towards menopause and it comes to light. But generally speaking, yes, I definitely think there is more awareness.
Okay, so can we talk about that cohort that have just sat on it? What's showing up when they show up and when they come to you? What are you seeing?
I think people who have just really toughed it out over their life, who have not perhaps turned their attention to their own well-being, perhaps prioritise the well-being of others, like their family, above their own. In those years where you're raising a family,
and working,
exactly, and
caring.
your health is the lowest rung on the ladder.
Yeah, it's problematic, hey? Yeah, I hear what you're saying. What is it that triggers them to come and see somebody about this pain that they've gutsed it through for a couple of decades?
Occasionally you have people, I mean, heavy bleeding can also be associated with endometriosis. I haven't even really mentioned that, but occasionally have people being admitted to hospital with severe anemia because they're bleeding so heavily, or that the bleeding just becomes so difficult to manage, wearing nappies, adult nappies and to bed, strapping themselves in to leave the house. It becomes incredibly debilitating.
Yeah, again, it's impacting a regular life, right? You're not able to just function, not able to get up and leave your house.
Yeah.
You have to make sure you're not going to leak blood everywhere.
Exactly. And I think these days with working from home, flexible working arrangements is really awesome for lots of reasons, but it can sometimes almost mask the problem because people are able to sit in their bed with all of their bits on, managing things, where if you worked in an industry like mine where you just have to get up and go to work, that's harder to do.
Yeah. So can I talk about the impact, I guess, of endometriosis on different stages of life? If somebody has endo in their breeding years, what's the likely impact of that? Is there any known issues?
Breeding years, do you mean
20s to 40s, pre-perimenopause?
Yeah. From the age of first period to last period.
Yeah, sure. That's quite a big stage.
Yeah, exactly. Perhaps sometimes it's easier to frame it from adolescence onwards, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's frame it in a way that's easier.
Yeah, sure.
I love it. You're the expert.
So I guess we used to think that you couldn't get endometriosis when you were a teenager because you needed to leak the cells out through the tubes to develop the disease over time for that to grow and affect you. And so the longer you were after your first period, the more likely that was to develop. And just to some degree that's true, but we now know that if you do keyhole surgery for adolescents, you will find endometriosis, and some of that will be that embryological development that I talked about earlier. But the problem with adolescent group is that painful, heavy, chaotic periods can actually be really common in that age group, not necessarily linked to endometriosis. But if you are diagnosed with endometriosis later in life, at least 20% of those people will reflect on their periods having been terribly painful from the very first go. So there's something in that. And when I see lots of teenage patients with painful periods that it's worth talking about endo, it doesn't necessarily mean we need to do a surgery or anything like that, but we should be exploring endo and how that may manifest, and so have that in the picture quite early on. And that tends to be managed with quite conservative approach, often hormonal management and lifestyle modification. And then once you move into, I suppose what you mean by breeding years are when people are actively wanting to get pregnant. And about 30 to 50% of people with endometriosis will have some difficulty conceiving. The take-home message there is that up to 70% of people have no problem at all. Okay. And that's actually really important, because if you're talking to teenagers about endo and they are thinking that they can't get pregnant, that's an enormous burden to walk around with, and is factually not correct for the bulk of people. And so, yes, it definitely can be a player in infertility, and for a group of those people, they will need some assistance, but many people with endometriosis will conceive without any problems at all.
70%. Nice. That is useful. Can you tell me about kind of the menstrual cycle according to how the uterus and the hormones all work together?
Sure. So it's actually very simple. You've got two main female hormones that are estrogen and progesterone, and estrogen works a little bit like fertilizer on the lining of the uterus, so it will cause it to grow. That's really important in preparation for a pregnancy, so it creates this really pillowy, lovely space for an early pregnancy to implant. And then after ovulation, the ovary will produce progesterone, which is very important for supporting that pregnancy until it can support itself. But it also has this role in regulating your periods, because it is a little bit like a lawnmower that will come round and trim the lining of the uterus, and then that results in the release of the lawn clippings that is your period. So estrogen causes the lining to grow, and then progesterone will trim it, and the balance between the two is incredibly important. So you need just as much growing as there is trimming. And if you're not ovulating regularly, you will get more growth and more thickening of the lining because of that fertilizer effect, proportional to your lawnmower, which then has to work harder to try and trim that space.
Does that explain a little bit in perimenopause how there are these massive blood clots?
Absolutely. That's exactly why that happens. So you've got a lawnmower trying to trim this really overgrown space that's been growing for much longer than it usually would. And that's why something like the Mirena IUD is really helpful for managing that bleeding, because it's a little bit like a robotic robotic lawnmower on the inside of the uterus, just constantly trimming that tennis court, keeping it all nice and trim, so that it's overcoming that really easily.
Okay, cool.
So in perimenopause, and I suspect your listeners will have a general understanding of what we mean by that, ovulation becomes less regular.
Yes.
Can happen close together or quite far apart.
Yes.
And ovulation is followed by usually about 2 weeks of the release of progesterone hormone. So in endometriosis, we have your two main female hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen, lovely hormone, makes us feel good. Lack of estrogen makes us feel quite crap. But estrogen is a driver of inflammation, and inflammation underpins endometriosis. So endo only generally exists or is active in the presence of estrogen. And progesterone sometimes makes us feel a bit blah and a bit bloated and puffy and a bit flat, but is anti-inflammatory in its effect. So it's like a cooling, calming ice pack on a swollen ankle for the pelvis. And in perimenopause, you release sometimes less progesterone because you're not ovulating as regularly. You have a higher proportion of your estrogen driving that underlying disease process, with proportionally less counteracting ice pack to soothe and counteract that effect. So endometriosis has the potential to really thrive in that environment. And if you then add hormonal treatment on top of that to manage your menopausal symptoms, you potentially have an exacerbation of that as well.
That's interesting, because that estrogen level in perimenopause can go higher than it's ever gone, and then it dips, and you've potentially got very heavy bleeding for some people, irregular bleeding, long bleeding, heavy bleeding. So that could conflate with, what is this? Is this perimenopause? Is this endometriosis? Is this right? So diagnostically, How do people, I mean, I'm so glad to hear that teenagers are coming to you saying, my periods are painful, they're irregular, they're chaotic, and asking good questions about how they can manage that, even understanding their menstrual cycle, because it's not really about the blood, right? The menstrual cycle isn't blood focused. It's ovulation
exactly
focused.
I always say that having a normal period is a sign of good health, but it's not actually the bleed that's the recognition of that. It's the ovulation event that occurred 2 weeks prior.
And that makes sense because we're very visually oriented. We like to, our period literally means the blood that we lose. But that whole menstrual cycle and the powerful impact of ovulation and what's happening inside the body isn't visible to us. I'm really excited that people are beginning to understand more.
Definitely.
What's going on there.
I also think that credit needs to be given to their mums as well, because the reason why endometriosis went unacknowledged for a long time was multi-layered. Obviously, the medical community had a role to play in that, but there was also societal aspects, and then also self, as women, we put our needs at the bottom of the pack, and people pleasing, and we sort of don't want to make a big fuss and blah blah blah. And
that bloody estrogen.
Exactly.
It's good for some things.
It's really good, but also causes problems. But
Yes.
And then on a societal level, because these things tend to run in families, a teenager might say to their mum, "Oh, my periods are like really painful," and they just say, "Oh, that's just how our periods happen in our family," or "That's normal. That's what happened to me too." Haven't talked to anyone else about it, so that's the only perspective you get. And because that movement of endo management started about 30 years ago, those people who were managed in years gone by now have children and can say, well, I have endo, we should be thinking about this early and blah, 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 which is really fantastic.
Credit to the mamas.
Absolutely.
So let's get back to diagnosis. How do you determine if somebody has endo?
So last year, our governing body, RANZCOG, released a new guideline for endometriosis, and in line with other international organisations has changed the primary mode of diagnosis from surgery to ultrasound. So
that's great.
Great. Much more accessible,
much
less
more cost
invasive,
effective, less
yes.
painful. Okay, we like it.
Yes, we like it a lot.
It's the efficacy? Well, you tell me about this.
It's very good if you have severe endometriosis. So if you have, we stage it from 1 to 4, you can definitely diagnose stage 3 and 4 endometriosis from an ultrasound for sure. Stage 2, pretty good. Stage 1, not very good at all. So if you have a normal ultrasound, it still does not rule out the condition at this stage. But if you have visible endometriosis, that is very that can be quite confidently diagnosed through ultrasound these days. That does require ultrasound skill in the endometriosis space, which is still evolving in terms of the workforce. I was going to say in sort of regional New Zealand, maybe that's not quite as accessible as it would be in a major centre and that sort of thing, but that will come over time. I always talk about, from a diagnosis point of view, the sort of 3 levels, the first being a clinical diagnosis, which is a slightly controversial concept, and it's not technically a diagnosis, but it is using the word endo to talk when you talk to a patient about their symptoms. And I think because ultrasound isn't always going to be completely diagnostic and surgery is not super accessible or necessarily the right thing for a person, and people talk about waiting 7 to 11 years to receive a diagnosis, some of that can be combated by actually just talking about endo very early on in the journey. And so someone doesn't turn up in their 40s and say, well, I've had these problems for 20 years and no one's mentioned endo to me at all in that process. So even if you're not making an actual diagnosis, it's not actually something that you would say you definitely have it. At least talking about it in that early phase is quite important. And then formal diagnosis, ideally through ultrasound.
You said there were 3 stages.
Yes.
So talking about it, diagnosis is the 3rd. What's the middle one?
Oh, no, sorry. Talking about it, ultrasound is the middle, and then surgery, which involves usually keyhole surgery and to look inside the pelvis. And that is not usually a diagnostic procedure. It combines diagnosis and treatment together. So you wouldn't do that unless you needed the surgery from a management point of view as well. And that ultimately is very formal diagnosis because the cells are removed and sent to the lab and examined under a microscope, and that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say to a woman, like what can women do to either, I don't really want to use the word advocate for themselves, but what can they pay attention to or take action on or investigate that is useful in their journey with what might be significant pelvic pain and or period pain that could lead to an endometriosis discovery or not? Like, what do you encourage women to do to understand their bodies and then get what they need?
I think one of the most important things is for people to understand their cycle, which is something that, as a gynaecologist, I've been working in this area for a very long time. I didn't even really have that much of an understanding until I'd had my babies and sort of turned my eye towards it. So it's not, I don't think it's something that generationally my age group were informed much about. I think a younger generation probably has more awareness, and there's a lot of content on social media about this now, for better or for worse. But actually understanding and tracking your cycle is actually a really valuable thing.
Tell me why.
Well, I think that there are a range of gynecological conditions which will manifest through distortion of your cycle, whether that be your cycle is very irregular, or for PMS, premenstrual syndrome, kind of symptom profile, pain, heavy bleeding, all of these sorts of things. And if you're not looking at it, you wouldn't notice. And some of that is to blame for the delay in all of these conditions not being picked up for a long time.
So you're saying collect the data, like pay attention to your own menstrual cycle, collect the data.
Yes.
How do we do that?
There are apps that you can use.
Yes, there are.
The Flow app is one that comes to mind that a lot of people use. I do perhaps have a little bit of worry about data collection from like IT company side of things. I don't know much about that, but a little bit of wariness. But even just on your calendar on your phone, just acknowledging when these things are kind of happening is also fine.
So what are women paying attention to? I got my period on this day. It lasted for this long. My pain was like, you can keep a diary on it.
Yep, absolutely. When ovulation, if you have some awareness of when ovulation occurs as well. So sometimes a little bit of single-sided crampy pain or tweaky pain, often coinciding with some egg whitey discharge or an increase in vaginal discharge, and breast tenderness around that time as well. And then the onset of pain and the onset of bleeding, and that probably alone is sufficient.
And then you take it to whom?
Well, initially to no one, but it just helps you to show up in your life with an understanding of where you are in this cycle. We live in a world that expects us to turn up every day exactly the same, but women are not the same person every day of the month. And it's not to say that you should not go to work. I can't cancel an operating list because I'm, premenstrual, but that you might approach the way you live your life slightly differently. You might prioritize your sleep or move your body in a different way or eat different foods. Or if you know that you have really significant premenstrual mood disturbance, then you might talk to your partner about that and some ways that you might adjust expectations or, yeah.
That's very good advice. I think it's very, very good for us to acknowledge and understand that we don't show up the same every day, that our energy levels, our capacity, our mood will rise and fall with that cycle. Like it's an impact that even when you know about it doesn't take it away, but it does give you some compassion for yourself.
Absolutely. And understanding, and that leans back to that, not over pathologizing the experience. That's not a disease. We are not diseased beings, and you don't need to see your GP about it necessarily unless it's bothering you, and there is help there if you want to. But simple measures, simple things like talking to your partner or talking to your family about where you're at goes a long way.
Nice. Speaking about GPs, there's so many wonderful caring doctors all around the country. If women go to their doctor and they are finding that they're not making headway for their own pain, is there advice? Have you got advice for women on how they might be able to communicate more effectively?
Yes, and I hope that this is much less common than it was. There's been an enormous amount of work by the awesome GP group in New Zealand. So by and large, I hope people are experiencing really positive, empathetic and validating care.
I hope so too.
But of course, there's going to be cases where that's not the case. I would say two things. One is arm yourself with knowledge. So don't just go and sort of be like, what could this, I'm a bit sore or I'm experiencing pain. I don't know what to do. There's so much out there, podcasts, even guidelines from within organisations like RANZCOG.
How do you spell RANZCOG?
RANZCOG, Royal Australia and New Zealand College of Obstetrics and Gynaecology.
Well,
it's a real
RANZCOG.
mouthful.
It does sound like it's from Tolkien universe.
It does, yes.
Which is kind of cool.
It's a very modern organisation, but RANZCOG have guidelines that basically underpin practice of all O&G doctors in Australia and New Zealand. So they have an endometriosis guideline which helps to outline the basic premise of evidence-based care. And not everybody is going to be in a position where they're going to want to churn through that sort of guideline, but they also have patient information sheets and things online as well. But I think doing some reading beforehand actually makes a really big difference, or listening to a podcast like this that helps to kind of get those cogs turning, that helps you to know what is normal and what's abnormal. And then the second thing I would say, it's always good to take someone with you as a support person to help with that conversation, but a question that is really helpful if you think you might have endo and you're not sure that you're being validated in that concern would be to simply say, how can you be sure that this isn't endometriosis? And if someone turns up to my rooms and they've got pain, even if they've got a normal ultrasound, I can't completely say that they don't have endo. And that doesn't mean they necessarily need to have a surgery, but that's where you should be including endo in your conversation in terms of management.
Nice. That sounds good. Okay, probably a couple of quick-fire questions to finish with. For women experiencing period pain and or potentially endo symptoms, what are some things they can do for managing that pain?
Well, the treatment specifically for endometriosis is sort of three-layered with non-hormonal, hormonal and surgical approaches. Non-hormonal is really optimizing pain relief with paracetamol and anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen or Ponstan, which have that anti-inflammatory effect on the pelvis, with endo being underpinned by inflammation. So they kind of go quite nicely together. And then from a hormonal perspective, we use progesterone as an anti-inflammatory hormone, like I mentioned, to target endometriosis.
So like the Mirena, like
absolutely
an IUD that has progesterone in it.
Yes, so that can be in any form of hormonal treatment that has progesterone, which can be the combined pill, the progesterone only pill, the IUD, the depot injection, the implant. They're all thought to be basically as good as each other at treating endo. And it's really about what fits the person and what's kind of suitable to them and what their needs are. And a lot of people I see say, I don't want to mask the disease, or they might be referred in by their GP and they say they don't want to start anything until they see the specialist. But progesterone treatment is kind of like, it's not really, but I equate it to like chemotherapy for cancer, in that it's actually a really targeted treatment for those cells. It turns them off like a light switch at the wall. So don't wait, just go and figure out what the right hormonal treatment is for you, but get on it as soon as possible, because while you're waiting potentially to see a specialist, that will be doing some really good work in the background. And then surgery generally is reserved for people for whom they have symptoms beyond hormonal treatment. So their symptoms are not well managed on hormones, or in the fertility realm where hormonal treatment generally is contraceptive. So that's not an option.
Okay.
In this conversation, endo is the anchor in the middle of the conversation, which is really important. But unless outside of fertility, so for people with pain, really the center of that conversation is the pain. And so endo is an important consideration, and and treatment focus, but pain needs to be looked at from a much more holistic perspective than just a disease. And that's looking at the pelvis from a multifunction point of view, so bowel function, bladder function, pelvic floor muscle function, and then also considering pain as a central experience in the brain. So pain actually isn't experienced in the pelvis, it's experienced up here. And the brain can modify pain in lots of different ways depending on lots of different things. And I equate that to basically turning the volume up and down on a stereo. And so management of endometriosis pain needs to be focused on the disease, but also pelvic physio to address muscle dysfunction, sometimes a dietitian to look at diet and gut function. And then from a brain perspective, it's incredibly important to consider things like sleep, movement, mental health, stress, financial stress, relationship stress, and the role of the nerves in the overall experience of the pain as well. So it's really trying to put the nervous system in a chill zone rather than a, oh my gosh, this is all going crazy, what's wrong, state of fear.
So just to dig into that, the pain being located in the brain, I have a dear friend who has had a hysterectomy now, but who had complex pelvic pain. And I remember her specialist saying to her, ideally, we need to resolve this within this certain time frame, or the brain can get attached to the pain. This is my words. But that presentation of pain becomes a brain symptom that the brain is just able to continue. So can you speak to that idea of chronic pain and how the body might respond in comparison to, say, acute pain?
Absolutely. So I always compare humans to jellyfish in that
this seems like a very logical comparison.
We are so similar. We are not. We are evolved, like highly functioning beings, and jellyfish don't have a brain. They don't experience pain, but we do. And all of the signals of our nervous system funnel up through into the brain for interpretation. And they come from pain fibers, but also soft touch, light touch, temperature, vibration, joint position, all of these signals going up to the brain at any given moment. And if we received all of those messages, we would just be completely dumbfounded and couldn't do anything with our lives. So there are filtration mechanisms within that central nervous system that I do love an analogy is a little bit like an email inbox.
An email inbox?
Yes,
inbox. I'm with you.
So you've got your main inbox, you've got your other, and you've got your junk mail. And your main inbox is you're sitting too close to the fire, you're going to get burnt, can you get up and move away? Quite important. Please look at that straight away with good focus. That's your
pay this fine or it goes to court.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Final warning.
Because, sometimes I get the odd traffic violation fine.
Occasionally. They usually come to me in the post, but yeah. Your other might be that you rolled your ankle when you were 15, and sometimes it flares up a little bit if you've been walking too much or something, and it's there. You'll look at it if you really need to, but mostly it's kind of just in the background. And that might be your subscription to Karen Walker or something, that they send you a little monthly update of what's new, and you'll look at it if you can be bothered, but mostly it's okay. And then you've got your junk mail, which is you're being hacked, don't open it. And that's some sensation that is completely non-functioning. It doesn't actually serve a purpose in your body at that given moment. And so that just goes directly to the junk mail and is invisible. It's not even seen. But when you have had a chronic exposure to pain over a long period of time, those filtration mechanisms don't function so well, and so they get scrambled mostly in the direction of the main inbox. So they move the junk mail into the main inbox, and you see that it's very real experience of pain. It's not in your head or you're not crazy, but it's pain that for people without the background experience of pain, it would never be seen, and it's simply invisible. And so the overall burden of pain increases by that process, and the volume gets turned up really loud. So the nervous system is just blaring those pain messages, full noise at you all day long. And that can manifest in really interesting ways. So I have a patient who broke their toe many years ago, and when they get a flare of the endo pain each month, they can feel, it's not really severe, but they can just feel their toe kind of a little bit activated, twingy, because of that nerve response in the brain, which I think is a really lovely example of that dysfunction. And we also know at a nerve level, so that's the brain, but even at we call it peripheral nerves, so the nerves that supply all of the organs in the body and the muscles and nerves, we typically would think they sort of go on and off depending on the activation of that nerve. And that does happen, but over time they become very trigger sensitive. So they'll go on a lot easier than they would be for someone without that background in pain. So they're like waiting for anything to set them off, which might be a poo moving through the rectum or an ovulation event, which for somebody else they might not really get much. But suddenly these nerves are like, yeah, set me off. I want to go off, let's go. And then instead of going off really quickly, they stay on, and it sort of slowly trickles off over time as well. So the overall proportion of time from an event that flicks on those nerves, they're on for a lot longer and a lot louder.
So I guess I'm asking that to in essence see if when we are living with large amounts of pain, is it wise to look at that pain sooner rather than later, because we don't want the brain to become wired to that level of noise.
Absolutely. And that's why the concept of sort of toughing it out is not great for women, because it just allows this to kind of brew slowly over time into something that's a bit like a wildfire. So actually being mindful, cognizant of your body's functions, and then recognizing when things are starting to move beyond what you feel comfortable with for your own life, and actively managing that, getting onto it pretty quickly is a good idea.
Yeah. I just have this feeling like we probably unwittingly have outsourced the management of our health. We're like, unless I really need intervention, I'm just going to keep going. And I've got lots on, and I'm busy, and I'm needing to be productive and caring and active and social and la 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 la. But that idea of sort of circuit breakering to make sure that, I had a frozen shoulder, and I left it for months. I just didn't get to myself, and I thought, in hindsight, I could have actually been doing damage there.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the same experience with a back injury, and I, with all the privilege that I have in my knowledge of this area, I could feel that happening. Like I could notice my sleep really suffered. And even that alone, every time I would have a bad night's sleep, I would lie there thinking, this is terrible for my brain. Like, this is so bad. It's all happening. I'm starting that cycle. So yes, absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need to have surgery or necessarily need to take hormones if you don't want to.
No.
But thinking about a holistic management strategy that might involve prioritization of sleep or seeing a physio or doing various things earlier rather than later.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can hop into the driving seat of your body and your brain and your pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Amelia Ryan, thank you so much. I guess I ask every guest, so why not? What do you think that 80-year-old Dr. Amelia Ryan would say to you today? If you can imagine her, she's 80. She's worked a lot. She's raised a family. What would she say to you?
Slow down.
Sister.
You've got time. Yeah. Hard to do though.
It is. Lots of things are hard to do. Doesn't mean they're not worthwhile.
No, true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can be wise and take a wee while to action it, can't we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for taking time to sit down with me. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Mihi nui kia korua. Dr. Amelia Ryan and Fatima Savea, thank you both so much for sharing your expertise and your personal story. This is a disease that deserves a bigger space in our public consciousness, so people don't suffer unnecessarily or alone. If you're hungry for content, we're releasing previous episodes on YouTube, and I have another podcast. It's called Sunday Sanctuary, and it's also very peaceful. Thanks to Love It Media and our home crew. You can support this mahi at greyareas.nz. Thank you very much. Our music is by Aro. This song is Korimako. Until next time, go gently with yourself and all your nearest and dearest uteruses. See you in our next episode.